Good morning, Bucknutters. It is Thursday, May 12th, 2016. I am Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5, joined by Steve Wiltfong, Director of Recruiting for 24/7 Sports. We probably should have turned the recorder on. The last 10 minutes we had was really good radio, but it's adult radio, so we've got to keep it good for the kids. Steve, how are you this fine morning?
Good morning. Doing well, man. Survived the storms last night. Did they get pounded?
We got a little something in there. But it's gray outside, and there's, more than 50% chance of rain for today, so it's par for the course. One of the ways I stay out of weather depression is by following Ohio State recruiting. You're fortunate enough to get to do that as part of your employment as well. Things are going quite well for the Buckeyes. You have been all over it. You were in Columbus this past weekend for another camp. We're going to talk about that. But first, I want to get everybody kind of up to speed on quarterback recruiting. It's clear that Ohio State is literally taking the map of the United States and going after the best of the best. We're talking about guys from Las Vegas, guys from the South. In particular, Emory Jones, class of 2018, the newest name to kind of bubble up. You wrote about him. Let's bring everybody up to speed on 2018 quarterback Emory Jones out of Georgia.
Well, Ohio State offered the nation's number 2 dual threat quarterback, according to 24/7 Sports, in the 2018 class yesterday in Emory Jones, who, as I'm sure you guys read, told me that he grew up a Braxton Miller fan, which is funny to me because Braxton Miller was still on Ohio State's team last year, making Emory Jones a sophomore last year. But Braxton, it did seem like he was at Ohio State for a long time, and his first start as a freshman does seem like a long time ago. Emory Jones was in middle school and maybe even elementary school when Braxton's career started. So time flies, but the Buckeyes certainly shoot to the top of the list. Emory almost committed to Tennessee in April, but some offers slowed that process down. Sounds like the Buckeyes will have a great shot of landing Emory. The nation's number 1 dual threat quarterback is Phil Jerkovich from Pennsylvania. I have a crystal ball selection in for Ohio State after hanging out with Phil this weekend, talking to people with knowledge of Phil's recruitment. Phil was in Ohio for the Nike football training camp and Elite 11 deal over at Westerville North on Saturday that I hung out with Bill Kurlick at. But anyway, I think Phil, as he goes into his next wave of visits, I like where Ohio State stands, but Emory Jones is certainly a big-time prospect, and Ohio State went on him as well. And so maybe it's a race to the boat. I'm not as sure what Emory's timeline is now. I could see Phil making a decision during the season, and I expect him back at Ohio State for camps. Notre Dame remains a big-time challenger. They're very much in it. I could see Phil picking Notre Dame. Penn State will get him back to campus. He likes Pitt, wants to go down to Clemson. North Carolina, Michigan State, Wisconsin, or other schools Phil mentioned, but Ohio State, Notre Dame look like they're the 2 battling for Phil Jerkovich.
When you see Jerkovich and Jones, are you comfortable with the ranking of Jerkovich 1 and Jones 2?
I am. I think Phil Jerkovich, and this is no disrespect to Emory Jones because we think he's fantastic also and have him in the top 50 overall. But Phil Jerkovich, if he puts it all together and if he picks a school that he's a perfect fit for, like Ohio State, where obviously the offense would be outstanding for him, and Urban Meyer has a track record with that position of getting big-time results, whether it's an Alex Smith, a Tim Tebow, a J.T. Barrett. I think Phil Jerkovich has that kind of potential. Then at 6'4", has that potential to go to the next level like a Cardale Jones and Alex Smith and even Tebow for a cup of coffee and be a big-time guy in the NFL. And so Phil's just a special guy. He's a great athlete. He plays basketball. And when you watch him play a basketball game, he's the guy that's defending the other team's best player. And he's just a physical guy. No disrespect again to Emory, but Phil's the number 1 dual threat quarterback in the country with more upside than anybody. Maybe you put him in that discussion with Trevor Lawrence, who's the number 1 player overall when you start talking upside, if he's able to put it all together. And that's why we have Phil in at number 9 right now in our 24/7 Sports 2018 rankings.
Okay, which brings us to everything's connected here. 2017 quarterback recruiting, believe me, Danny Clark has had his name talked about so much on Bucknuts. We will not talk about that right now, but I'm curious how 17 affects 18. There have been some recent crystal ball flips for Tate Martell to go to Cal, which always I told you before we talk makes me suspect. Talk about that. Talk about what you expect to happen with 17 and how that could possibly affect 18 or not at all.
Well, for me, I have Tate Martell. I have him crystal ball to Ohio State. I think he's going to Ohio State. I think some other people are trying to guess that he eventually won't end up at Ohio State and they're going to Cal. And I don't know how, sometimes the way people use the crystal ball, it drives me insane. For me, I try and tell you where I think the kid's going on this day. So I think Tate Martell is going to Ohio State right now. Will I ultimately flip to Cal? Can I see Cal as a possibility for Tate Martell? Hell yeah. The old OC at Texas A&M that recruited him, Coach Spav, is now at Cal. I know they have a great relationship. Tate Martell is from California. I could definitely see him at Cal, but right now I see Tate Martell going to Ohio State, and I see Ty John Lindsay going to Ohio State. And so until that changes, the only way right now is if Tate takes other visits, and those are game changers, or if Kellen Mond beats him to the punch at Ohio State for a quarterback we're not talking about right now. I think Tate Martell is going to be a Buckeye. Now, some people, they make their crystal ball picks as projections. They know that's not the leader right now, but they try and guess 2 or 3 dominoes, and sometimes they hit. You can make an educated guess that Tate Martell is going to end up at Cal. I get it. But as of May 12th at 8:31 in the morning on Thursday's Bucknuts Morning 5, I think Tate Martell is still going to Ohio State.
That is some up-to-date reporting there and some good stuff. We will be all over that. I have to agree. What I'm curious to see is once Tate Martell commits, how will that affect Phil Jerkovic or Emory Jones? Or what do you think on that?
I don't think.
You think Jerkovic?
Well,
go ahead.
I don't think so. I mean, when you start considering schools, when you're looking at the Ohio States and the Clemsons and the Notre Dames of the world, they're bringing in a guy that can play in front of you, and they're going to bring in a guy that can play behind you. So unless you're completely looking to duck competition, it's irrelevant to all these guys across the board, including Tate Martell and Kellen Mond. And then you look to the next class, Phil Jerkovic and Emory Jones. And then in 2019, those guys, they're not going to care about Phil and Emory. I shouldn't say they shouldn't completely care because it's noticed, but at the same time, you do what you got to do.
Yeah, I like that mentality too. And I also like what you said about Jerkovic. He is a competitor. I've heard he's a nasty hoopster. I love the multiple sport guys. Speaking of multiple sport guys and standouts, you were in Columbus this past weekend. We've covered what went on at the camp, the opening camp and such. You let us know, though, who stood out to you? Now that the camp's a few days in your rearview mirror, when you think back on the camp, who were some of the guys that are still kind of bouncing around your head?
Oh, man, that's such a loaded question. I thought Jake Moretti was just awesome. Josh Myers was great. Antoine Simmons does what he does in the setting and really flies around and going to be a really good player for the Buckeyes at linebacker. So those 3 Ohio State commits were eye catchers for me. Phil Jerkovic and his upside. Jamias Williams is in the discussion as the top corner in the country. He had a good visit to Ohio State. The Buckeyes in the top 4 or 5 there. Thought Lamont Wade had a good camp, the top 247 corner out of Pennsylvania. I think Ohio State's in the top 2 there with Penn State. Donovan Peoples-Jones is really good in one-on-ones. I think Ohio State's in the top 2 or 3 there for the 5-star receiver, number 1 player at his position in the country per the 24/7 Sports composite. Jalen Gill put up a big testing number, the 2018 recruit, number 1 player in state per 24/7 Sports in 2018. So those are names that stood out. And then the one guy that I think Ohio State's going to monitor, among others, they're not going to be the only one, but Pickerington Central running back Morgan Ellison put up a Nike football rating of 131.9. I don't have the number in front of me, but I think that's a bigger number than J.K. Dobbins, who is a big-time freak show athlete. But Morgan Ellison just doesn't have tape. He's been banged up the last couple years. If he goes out and has a terrific senior year, if Morgan Ellison, just because it's fun to say this, if he goes out and rushes for 1,800 yards and 30 touchdowns, how can you not consider him a big-time running back prospect? And maybe he won't do that, but he's big, he's strong, he can catch the football, he's obviously very athletic. It's just almost disappointing that he has battled injuries his whole high school career. I'm really rooting for him as a senior to have a big year, because in the camp setting, he certainly looks like a big-time guy. And so, Bucknuts readers, keep an eye on Pickerington Central running back Morgan Ellison and root for him this fall to have a great year.
Yeah, I'm looking at, as you say that, I'm looking at his results from the weekend. And what's interesting about these Spark results is these are official results. They get measured and such. Morgan Ellison, 6 foot half an inch, 216 pounds, then a sub 4.740, and they create this composite rating. His vertical is almost 36 inches. His shuttle is nice, so they create.
What was that shuttle, Dan?
It was 4 flat.
4 flat. So he's got great feet, moves well laterally, got speed to pull away, but he's more of that agile guy that's going to be able to be slippery in between the tackles and bounce around and have good balance. And then, he's not going to have that Ezekiel Elliott speed, but everything else looks pretty damn good.
Yeah, if you look at his shuttle time of 4 flat, the other guys that were turning those times, for example, Jalen Gill is 4.01, and by my count and quick math from the Harvard of the Midwest, that's 28 and 16. He's 44 pounds lighter. So that lets you know that Morgan Ellison, 6 foot half an inch and 216 pounds, running like that going into your senior year of high school, you are an elite physical specimen, like you said. Now, what he turns into going forward, we shall see, but very, very impressive. Who's Drew Keyseye from Homestead, Indiana, the quarterback?
That's like the best testing score that's ever happened at the quarterback position. He's a little over 6 foot. Dan plays
he's
for a really
6'2", 185, dude. His shuttle was 3.82. His vertical was 2 inches higher. He had the second highest rating. I've never heard of him. I'm just saying he's number 2 here. Morgan Ellison was number 1.
Right. That's the highest quarterback rating of all time. He's got some action, some MAC offers. And
just as a aside,
so the last quarterback at his high school is now the starting quarterback at Western Michigan, Zach Terrell. So they've had guys at that position produce.
Well, just as an aside, when we first started doing this with these numbers back in the day, I was looking through one of these and kind of like the Drew Keyseye, and I apologize for mispronouncing his name. His last name is K-E-S-Z-E-I. So it could be Kazai, Gesundheit. But there was a guy on one of these ratings, and I looked in it, and his numbers were off the chart at this Baltimore workout. And he was going to be a sophomore in high school, and I said to Bill Curl, keep an eye on this guy. And I told Bill's name, and he had never heard of him, and it was Connor Kroll, who eventually committed to Ohio State. And that was purely a name on an Excel spreadsheet. But obviously these ratings and these workouts are kind of like the NFL Combine. It could be fool's gold. But when you put it all together, it's certainly impressive. Where do they go from here? The tightness of the class in 2017, you got a vibe on who the next guy could be? It's kind of the standard sign-off question here that we try and get into.
Oh, man. Ohio State best class ever. Let's see. For Urban Meyer. I wrote about this earlier this week, and it's such a loaded question I need to pull it up just to make sure I don't forget a name.
Basically, hold on a second. Let me give everybody some context here. Steve wrote a story that's up on the site now. Everyone knows what the class of 2013 did for Ohio State, both in the trophy case and recently on the stage in Chicago for the NFL draft. And there's some chatter that the class of 2017 could eventually match that, and you wrote about that.
So who could be next? I don't know if many guys Ohio State's recruiting right now have a timeline that says they're going to commit soon. My guess would be Amir Reap, who is a top safety target for the Buckeyes. Him or Jalen Harris, the receiver from Cleveland, would be guys that I would, if you made me say, Steve, who's next, I would point to those two. But I think Tyjon Lindsey ends up in the class. Trayvon Grimes be in the class. Chase Young, the number one player in Maryland, according to 24/7 Sports defensive end. I think they lead for him. We already talked about Lamont Wade. We talked about Donovan Peoples-Jones. I think Ohio State leads for Jeffrey Okudah, the 5-star from Texas, maybe the best defensive back in the land, could play corner or safety on the next level. So many big names left. Amir Reap, Jalen Harris, maybe Trayvon Grimes would be my guess of who's next, but that's completely a guess because not sure on timelines, but it could be a very special haul. And when you look at 2016 and who Ohio State signed there, and then you look at what they could get in 2017, maybe there's some potential for those two groups to match what 2013 did when you start talking about NFL guys.
Hey, talk a little about the story you wrote and what you're hearing on it.
Well, it's just insane how many of those guys hit in 2013. When you start looking to next year, Marcus Ball, Jarian Conley, Billy Price, Tyquan Lewis, J.T. Barrett's going to lead with every Big Ten record known to man, Michael Hill. Those guys are all pros. Tracy Sprinkle, Chris Worley have been impact guys. Dontre Wilson's an impact guy. Corey Smith, he's earned his scholarship. Cameron Burrows has earned his scholarship. James Clark's on the two deep. Everybody's making an impact, with the exception of a handful. So, for that many guys to affect your two deep and be NFL guys, it's insane. You look at 2016, Jonathan Cooper could be an NFL guy, Austin Mack, Michael Jordan, Tyler Gerard, Antonio Williams, Malik Barrow, Tuff Borland, Nick Bosa. Those guys all look like NFL futures. Benjamin Victor in that mix. Dwayne Haskins is a guy that Urban Meyer gushed over. Keandre Jones, Malcolm Prigione, Luke Farrell, I think, got some huge upside. You never know on the offensive lineman. Ed Warner's one of the best. So you look at Gavin Cupp and Jack Woolball now, and they're 3-star recruits, but they're going to play for a guy that's a proven developer at that position. Wayne Davis, Kareem Felder, Rajay Burns. It's just the class is deep with great size and length. The 2016 group could be special, and then 2017 was what my article was about. It's already coming together. There's elite guys in the class. So we'll see how it finishes up. Buckeyes ranked number one in the 24/7 Sports recruiting rankings right now in 2017 with 13 commits, led by a pair of 5-stars in Josh Myers and Sean Wade.
And what's incredible is we just spent the time talking about 2018, which is probably going to be, anchored by number 1 or number 2 quarterback in the class. So, ladies and gentlemen, things are good when it comes to recruiting at Ohio State. We are lucky that the director of recruiting for 24/7 Sports is located in the Midwest. Steve, as always on Thursday, we appreciate your time, brother.
If I lived in Hawaii, I'd still cover the hell out of the Buckeyes. Appreciate it.